The early morning light streamed through the windows of Dr. Adrian Cole's modest apartment, casting golden hues on the walls adorned with memories he tried to avoid. Each photograph, his wife Evelyn's laughter caught mid-frame, their young daughter Lucy blowing out birthday candles, felt like a fragment of a life shattered by tragedy. Adrian stared blankly into his coffee mug, its contents cold and untouched. His mornings had become a ritual of solitude, a stark contrast to the vibrant chaos he once thrived on. The ache in his chest never truly subsided, it simply became a part of him, a dull companion to his days. He glanced at the clock. It was nearly 7 a.m., and the city was waking. He could already hear the faint hum of traffic outside his building, a distant reminder of a world that never paused. With a heavy sigh, he grabbed his coat and headed out, the hospital awaiting him like an old friend and adversary. Pine Grove Medical Center was alive with its usual rhythm, the steady beeps of monitors, the chatter of nurses, and the occasional urgency of a gurney wheeling by. Adrian moved through it all with practiced precision, his white coat trailing slightly as he checked on patients. "Good morning, Dr. Cole," Nurse Meredith Sanders called out, her cheerful demeanor a sharp contrast to Adrian's stoic nod. He appreciated her efforts to bridge the invisible gap he'd constructed around himself. But he wasn't ready to let anyone in. After his rounds, Adrian found himself wandering through the older wings of the hospital. The East Wing, long condemned, stood in eerie silence. The peeling paint and faded, "Condemned, do not enter" sign marked it as off-limits. Yet something drew him closer. The air was colder here, heavy with the scent of disuse. As Adrian lingered by the entrance, a faint sound reached his ears, a soft scuffling, like someone trying to remain unseen. His brows furrowed as he pulled out his flashlight and stepped inside. The beam of his flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing the remnants of a once bustling ward. Rusted beds stood askew, medical carts lay toppled, and the walls bore faded murals of cheerful animals, a haunting reminder of the children who once stayed here. "Hello?" Adrian called out, his voice echoing in the empty space. He heard it again, a rustle, closer this time. Rounding a corner, he stopped abruptly. There, crouched in the shadows near an overturned supply cart, was a boy, no older than 10. His clothes were tattered, and his face streaked with dirt. He held something tightly to his chest, a photograph. Adrian realized. "It's okay," Adrian said, lowering himself to the boy's level. "I'm not here to hurt you." The boy's wide, terrified eyes darted toward the nearest exit. But he didn't move. Adrian slowly set his flashlight down, letting the soft glow illuminate the space without blinding the child. "What's your name?" Adrian asked gently. The boy hesitated before whispering. "Jordan." Adrian's heart clenched at the raw fear in the boy's voice. "Jordan, what are you doing here? This place isn't safe." Jordan clutched the photograph tighter. "I can't leave. She told me to stay here." "To wait." Adrian frowned, concern deepening. "Who told you to wait?" Jordan's lips trembled as he muttered, "My mom." Back in his office, Adrian stared at the photograph Jordan had reluctantly handed him. It was worn, edges frayed from constant handling. The image showed a woman in scrubs with warm eyes and a tired smile. She had her arm around Jordan, who looked much younger but unmistakably happy. Adrian's thoughts raced. The boy had been living in the abandoned wing, scavenging for food and hiding from sight. Why? And where was his mother? Jordan sat on the couch across the room, still wary of Adrian but too exhausted to flee. A tray of food sat untouched on the small table before him. "Jordan," Adrian began cautiously, "how long have you been here?" The boy shrugged, his thin shoulders barely moving. "A while." Adrian pressed gently. "And your mom? When was the last time you saw her?" Jordan's eyes filled with tears. She went to stop them. She said she'd come back." "Stop who?" Adrian leaned forward, his voice calm but insistent. Jordan shook his head, curling into himself. "She told me not to tell. She said it's dangerous." Adrian sat back, unease settling in his chest. Whoever Jordan's mother was, she had been trying to protect him from something, or someone, inside this hospital. Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that Jordan's story was tied to something far larger. The next day, he began digging through hospital records. It wasn't easy. Much of the East Wing's history had been archived, or erased, years ago. One name kept surfacing, Lila Reed. a nurse who had worked in pediatrics until her abrupt disappearance over a year ago. There were no termination papers, no official records of her leaving. She had simply vanished. In the staff lounge, Adrian approached Meredith, who had been at Pine Grove long enough to know its secrets. "Meredith," Adrian began, keeping his voice casual, "do you remember a nurse named Lila Reed?" Meredith's cheerful demeanor faltered. She glanced around before lowering her voice. "Why do you ask? I came across her name in some old files." Adrian lied, testing her reaction. "What happened to her?" Meredith hesitated before replying. "She was one of the best. Always putting patients first. But one day, she just stopped coming in. Rumors flew around, of course. Some said she left after a dispute with administration. Others said it was something darker." Adrian's jaw tightened. He needed to know more. That evening, Adrian returned to his apartment with copies of every record he could find on Lila Reed. The sparse documentation painted a fragmented picture: glowing performance reviews, commendations for her work with terminally ill children, and a sudden gap. Her last logged shift dated over a year ago. But it was the final document that caught his attention: a security report of an incident involving nurse Lila Reed and an unidentified visitor. Details were scarce, but the report mentioned a confrontation in the East Wing days before her disappearance. Adrian's mind raced. What could have happened in that condemned part of the hospital to force her into hiding, or worse? From the corner of his living room, Jordan stirred on the couch. He'd finally agreed to stay with Adrian for the night, though his reluctance was palpable. He clutched the photograph of his mother like a lifeline. Adrian sat beside him, careful not to overwhelm the boy. "Jordan, I've been reading about your mom. She was a great nurse. Everyone says so." Jordan nodded but didn't look up. "I found something about an argument she had in the East Wing." "Do you know what it was about?" Adrian asked gently. Jordan's lip quivered. "She said they were hurting people. She wanted to stop them. But they didn't want her to." "Who didn't want her to?" Adrian pressed. "Them," Jordan whispered, his voice so low Adrian barely caught it. "The people in the suits. They told her to stay quiet. But she wouldn't. She said she had to protect me." Adrian's heart ached at the boy's fear. Whatever Lila had uncovered, it was enough to risk everything for her son's safety. But why had no one come forward? Why had the hospital erased her from its records? The next morning, Adrian returned to the East Wing. The abandoned corridors felt even more oppressive in the daylight, as if the silence carried the weight of everything left unsaid. He retraced his steps to the room where he'd found Jordan, searching for clues Lila might have left behind. It was in a supply closet, hidden behind a loose panel in the wall. That Adrian found it, a leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with Lila's neat handwriting. Flipping through, he saw lists of names, dates, and cryptic notes like "Patient 19, treatment failed," and "Unapproved protocol used on child." But it was the final entry that sent chills down his spine. "They're coming for me. If I don't make it back. Jordan must stay hidden. He's not safe. None of us are safe." Adrian stared at the words, a sense of dread settling over him. Lila had known her life was in danger, but she'd still chosen to fight. And now, her son was caught in the crossfire. That afternoon, Adrian sat across from Clara Whitman in a dimly lit cafe downtown. Clara was a tenacious investigative journalist known for uncovering corporate corruption, and Adrian hoped her skills would be the key to unraveling the truth. He slid Lila's notebook across the table. This belonged to a nurse who disappeared from Pine Grove Medical Center. "Her son, Jordan, is in my care now." She wrote about unapproved treatments, experiments on patients, some of them children. Clara flipped through the pages, her sharp eyes scanning the notes. "This is explosive," she said, her voice hushed. "But it's not enough to take down a corporation like Pine Grove. We need hard evidence, documents, witnesses." Adrian hesitated before adding, "I found security reports about her last days. And Jordan remembers men in suits threatening her." Clara leaned closer. "Men in suits? If this is what I think it is, you're dealing with a coordinated cover-up. Have you noticed anyone watching you?" Adrian's stomach tightened. He hadn't, but the thought unsettled him. "No, but I have a feeling that might change." Clara nodded grimly. "Then we need to act fast. I'll dig into the hospital's financials and see if I can trace any connections to private labs or pharmaceutical companies. In the meantime, keep that boy safe. If what you're saying is true, he's their last loose end. Over the next few days, Clara's investigation uncovered a disturbing pattern. Pine Grove Medical Center was funneling money to a shadowy organization called Orion Labs, which specialized in experimental drug trials. The funds were disguised as routine operational expenses, but Clara's sources confirmed that Orion Labs had ties to illegal human testing. This isn't just a rogue experiment, Clara told Adrian during a late-night phone call. This is an entire operation. And Lila found out about it. Adrian felt the weight of her words. He looked over at Jordan, who was asleep on the couch again, the lines of worry on his young face not fully fading even in rest. She wrote about something called Patient 19. Adrian said, "Do you know what that could mean?" Clara hesitated. "I'll look into it, but if this is what I think it is, Patient 19 feet might be a test subject. One of the first in their experiments." Adrian's grip on the phone tightened. "If they're experimenting on children, Clara, we have to stop them." "We will," Clara assured him, "but be careful, Adrian. People like this, they don't just erase records. They erase people." It was late one evening when the first sign of danger came. Adrian returned home to find his apartment door slightly ajar. His heart pounded as he stepped inside, every sense on high alert. The living room was trashed, cushions slashed, drawers emptied, papers scattered. Jordan's photograph of his mother lay crumpled on the floor. "Jordan," Adrian called, panic surging through him. "I'm here," came a small voice from the closet. Adrian opened the door to find Jordan curled up, clutching the photograph to his chest. His eyes were wide with fear. "They were here," Jordan whispered. "I heard them. They said they'd come back." Adrian hugged the boy tightly, his mind racing. This was no random break-in. Someone was sending a message. Desperate for more answers, Adrian contacted Victor Russo, a reclusive hacker with a reputation for exposing corporate secrets. They met in an underground cafe, where Victor sat hunched over his laptop, his fingers dancing across the keys. "This is heavy stuff," Victor said, reviewing the files Clara had uncovered. "Orion Labs doesn't exist in any official capacity, but their digital footprint suggests Black Ops-level secrecy. You're lucky you even found this much. Can you access their systems?" Adrian asked. Victor smirked. "Accessing is easy. Surviving what I find, that's the hard part." As Victor worked, Adrian felt a growing sense of urgency. The break-in had proven that they were running out of time, and that whoever was behind this wouldn't stop until Jordan was silenced. Victor's fingers moved with precision over the keyboard, the glow of the screen casting shadows across his sharp features. Adrian and Clara watched as lines of code scrolled rapidly. Victor muttering to himself, "Orion Labs has layers of encryption I've only seen in military-grade systems." He said, "Whoever set this up didn't want anyone snooping around." Suddenly, Victor's expression changed. "I'm in. These are their research logs." The room fell silent as Victor clicked on a folder labeled Project Genesis. The first file contained a list of subjects identified by numbers, not names. At the top was Patient 19. Victor opened the corresponding file. A photograph appeared, a young boy, no older than 6, lying unconscious on a hospital bed. The notes detailed experimental injections aimed at triggering cellular regeneration. The language was clinical, devoid of empathy. Adverse reactions observed. Subject terminated. Adrian clenched his fists as he read. "They're experimenting on children, treating them like lab rats." "There's more," Victor said grimly, opening another document. "It looks like Patient 19 was part of a trial to weaponize a compound. They wanted to create something that could rewrite human biology. But the results were catastrophic." Clara leaned closer, her voice cold. "And they used Pine Grove as their testing ground." Victor nodded. "This whole operation is built on plausible deniability. The experiments were done off-site. But the subjects came from the hospital, people with no one to miss them." Adrian felt sick, like Jordan's mother. And now they're after him because he's the last link to their crimes. That night, Adrian's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stay out of it, or the boy won't be the only one suffering." The message sent a chill down his spine. Whoever was behind this wasn't just watching, they were ready to act. Adrian turned to Jordan, who was playing quietly with a puzzle Clara had brought him. "We need to leave," he said firmly. Clara and Victor agreed, and within an hour, They were packed into Victor's van, heading to a safe house Clara had arranged. But their escape didn't go unnoticed. As they wound through darkened streets, headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. Victor's grip on the wheel tightened. "We've got company." Adrian glanced back. A black SUV was tailing them, closing the distance. "Can you lose them?" Victor smirked. "You don't hang out in this business without learning a few tricks." He swerved sharply down a side street, taking a labyrinthine route through the industrial district. The SUV kept pace, its engine roaring. Shots rang out, shattering the van's rear window. Jordan screamed, and Adrian pulled him down, shielding him with his body. Victor veered into an abandoned warehouse lot, slamming the brakes and cutting the engine. "Everyone out, now," he barked. They bolted from the van, weaving between rusted machinery and stacks of pallets. The SUV screeched to a halt, and armed men poured out. Clara tugged Jordan's hand, urging him forward as Adrian and Victor covered their retreat. The group eventually lost their pursuers, finding refuge in an abandoned church on the outskirts of town. The air was damp, and the faint scent of mildew hung in the air. But it was quiet, safe. Jordan clung to Adrian, his small body trembling. "I don't want them to find us," he whispered. "They won't," Adrian promised, though he wasn't sure if he believed it. "We'll keep you safe." As Victor set up his equipment again, Clara checked the files they'd managed to copy during their escape. "This isn't just about the experiments," she said. "Orion Labs is connected to high-level government contracts. If this goes public, it could bring down some very powerful people." Victor glanced up. "Which is why they're so desperate to stop us." Adrian thought of Lila, the risks she'd taken to protect her son. She'd known how dangerous these people were. But she'd fought anyway. "We need to go on the offensive," he said. "If we keep running, they'll just keep coming." Clara made the first call to a trusted contact in the media. Within hours, she'd arranged for a secret press conference at a downtown hotel. "We'll release everything we have," she said. "The files, the logs, the testimonies." Victor, meanwhile, worked to secure the files, creating redundancies across multiple servers. "If they shut one down, 10 more will pop up," he explained. "This story isn't going away." Adrian focused on Jordan. The boy's symptoms, the same as his mother's, were worsening. His breathing was labored, and his skin was pale. Adrian administered what treatments he could, but he knew it wasn't enough. Without the antidote Lila had hinted at in her notes, Jordan wouldn't survive. Victor's voice broke the tense silence. "I found something," he said, spinning his laptop around. "A hidden file in Orion's database. It's a formula for the antidote." Adrian's heart leapt. "Can you replicate it?" Victor hesitated. "Not me, but there's a researcher named Dr. Elena Navarro. She used to work with Orion before she went off the grid. If anyone can make this antidote, it's her." Tracking down Dr. Navarro proved to be a challenge. She had erased nearly all traces of herself. But Clara's connections led them to a small clinic in a remote coastal town. The clinic was modest, surrounded by dense forest. Inside, a woman with streaks of gray in her dark hair greeted them cautiously. "I don't take new patients," she said, eyeing them warily. "We're not here as patients," Adrian said, stepping forward. "We need your help." He explained Jordan's condition, the experiments, and the formula they'd discovered. Dr. Navarro's expression softened as she looked at the boy, who was leaning weakly against Adrian's side. "I left that world behind for a reason," she said, her voice heavy with regret. "But if this boy's life is at stake, I'll help." Dr. Navarro converted her small lab into a makeshift research station, working tirelessly to synthesize the antidote. Adrian stayed by Jordan's side, watching as the boy grew weaker with each passing hour. Clara and Victor kept watch outside, aware that Orion's agents could appear at any moment. The weight of their mission hung heavy in the air. If they failed, it wasn't just Jordan's life that would be lost, but the chance to expose a corrupt and deadly system. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dr. Navarro held up a vial of clear liquid. "This should neutralize the toxin," she said, "but we'll know for sure once it's administered." Adrian prepared the injection, his hands steady despite his racing heart. Jordan winced as the needle entered his arm, but he didn't cry out. Minutes passed. Then, gradually, the color returned to Jordan's cheeks. His breathing steadied, and the fever that had plagued him began to break. Adrian felt tears of relief sting his eyes. "Thank you," He whispered to Dr. Navarro. With Jordan stabilized, the group prepared for the press conference. They knew this was their last chance to expose Orion Labs and its enablers. The night before, Adrian held Jordan close, promising him, "We'll finish what your mom started. We'll make sure her fight wasn't in vain." The Grand Harbor Hotel's conference room was filled to capacity. Journalists from across the state, activists, and families of victims gathered, their expressions ranging from anticipation to fury. Clara Whitman had ensured the event received maximum coverage, with live broadcast streaming across multiple platforms. Dr. Adrian Cole stood backstage with Jordan, Victor, Clara, and Dr. Elena Navarro. The boy's recovery was progressing, but he still leaned on Adrian for support. Clutching his mother's photograph. "You're sure about this?" Clara asked, adjusting her camera equipment. "Once we go public, there's no turning back." Adrian nodded. "It's the only way." The event began with Clara taking the stage, her voice resonating through the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, today, you will hear a story of corruption, betrayal, and resilience. What you see here will shock you, but it's the truth that must come to light." Adrian took a deep breath as she introduced him. He walked onto the stage, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. Jordan followed, standing quietly by his side. Adrian adjusted the microphone. "My name is Dr. Adrian Cole," he began, his voice steady, "and I am here to expose a dark chapter in our medical system, one that cost countless lives, including those of children." Behind him, Victor projected slides of the stolen files, research logs, financial transactions, and photographs from the experiments. The audience gasped at the graphic images of patients in distress, their suffering meticulously documented in Orion Labs records. Adrian gestured to Jordan. "This is Jordan Reed." His mother, Lila Reed, was a nurse at Pine Grove Medical Center. She discovered the horrors of Orion Labs and sacrificed everything to protect her son and others like him. Jordan stepped forward, his voice small but determined. "My mom told me to stay hidden because bad people wanted to hurt us. She promised to come back, but she never did." The room fell silent, the weight of the boy's words sinking in. As the conference progressed, the tension in the room thickened. Clara played clips of the decrypted files, including damning emails between Orion Labs executives and high-ranking officials. The audience watched in horror as the scale of the conspiracy became clear. Suddenly, from the back of the room, a man stood up. It was William Archer. The crowd murmured, recognizing him as a figure of controversy in previous whistleblower accounts. "I was part of this," Archer said, his voice breaking through the silence. "I enforced their orders, silenced people who got too close. But I was also a victim. They experimented on me before offering me a position in their organization. What Dr. Cole and his team are saying, it's all true." The revelation sent a ripple through the audience. Archer's testimony, combined with the evidence on screen, was a turning point. As Adrian and the team left the stage, applause still ringing in their ears, Clara's phone buzzed. Her face paled as she read the message. "They're coming," she whispered. "Orion's men are on their way." Victor cursed under his breath. "They're not going to let this go." Security personnel rushed to block the exits as armed agents entered the lobby. The crowd began to panic, the room filling with shouts and confusion. Adrian pulled Jordan close, shielding him as chaos erupted. "They want the files," Adrian said. "We have to protect them." Victor held up his laptop. "Everything's been uploaded to secure servers. Even if they take us, the truth is out." One of the agents spotted Adrian and Jordan. "There," he shouted, raising his weapon. Before Adrian could react, Archer stepped in front of them. "Go," he barked, drawing their attention. He moved toward the agents, his hands raised. "I'll deal with them." Adrian hesitated but knew they couldn't waste time. Grabbing Jordan's hand, he followed Clara and Victor toward the hotel's service exit. The streets outside the hotel were eerily quiet, the night air heavy with tension. Adrian and the group moved quickly, their footsteps echoing off the pavement. Jordan clung to his mother's photograph, his face pale but resolute. Behind them, the sound of engines roared. A black SUV barreled around the corner, its headlights cutting through the darkness. "They found us," Clara said, her voice tight with fear. Victor pointed to an alleyway. "This way." They sprinted through narrow backstreets, dodging dumpsters and leaping over discarded crates. The SUV skidded to a halt, and armed men poured out, their boots pounding against the asphalt. Adrian and Clara reached a chain-link fence at the end of the alley. Adrian hoisted Jordan over first, then climbed after him, his muscles straining with effort. Clara followed, while Victor used a crowbar to slow their pursuers. As they reached the far side of the fence, Adrian spotted flashing lights in the distance. Police vehicles swarmed the area, blocking the agent's path. "We're safe," Clara said, her relief palpable. The morning after the press conference, news of the revelations dominated every major outlet. The files, combined with testimonies from Adrian, Clara, Archer, and the victims, painted an undeniable picture of Orion Labs' atrocities. Law enforcement raided Pine Grove Medical Center and Orion's hidden facilities, rescuing patients still trapped in experimental trials. Dr. Elena Navarro's antidote saved dozens of lives, with survivors speaking out about their suffering. Senator Robert Whitman, revealed as one of Orion's primary benefactors, was arrested alongside Daniel Grayson, the CEO of Pine Grove. Both faced charges of conspiracy, fraud, and manslaughter. Weeks later, Adrian stood in a courtroom beside Jordan. The judge smiled warmly as she signed the adoption papers. "Congratulations, Dr. Cole," she said. "You are now the legal guardian of Jordan Reed." Jordan looked up at Adrian, tears in his eyes. "Does this mean you're my dad now?" Adrian knelt, placing a hand on Jordan's shoulder. "It means we're a family." Months after the trial, a memorial was unveiled at the newly restored Pine Grove Medical Center. The names of the victims were etched into a stone monument, their memories honored by all who visited. Adrian and Jordan stood together, flowers in hand. Beside them, Clara and Victor joined the crowd, their faces reflecting quiet pride. "She'd be proud of you," Adrian said, his voice breaking as he placed the flowers at the base of the monument. Jordan nodded, holding his father's hand. "And I'm proud of her." The sun set over the garden, its golden light illuminating the monument, a symbol of justice, resilience, and hope for a better future.